Hey guys, how you doing? Hope you guys have been having a great weekend so far. For those of you in America, hope you guys have had a great Independence Day. Yeah, I'm sorry for the late start. I finished to take care of earlier this morning, but since I'm done with that, we can go and get started. Okay, for today I'm gonna try to have at least two characters done for today. So today I'm actually doing a character from one of my oops, excuse me, sorry to move the camera. From my friends from Discord, Good Boy Spiffy. He wanted me to kind of draw one of his OC characters, Henry. And so, for those that were here last time, I had did one of my OCs on Manny was a slapstick comedian. This time around, this guy is is also an entertainer as well, but he's really more of a magician. And so, what I'm gonna do is actually kind of draw a slightly different pose for him. So I'm just kind of lightly kind of put up different pose. There was a few I practiced a little bit earlier, but I didn't really just couldn't decide which one I want to do. I figure, with this guy, since he's, a magician, but he's also kind of like big TV personality vibes. I think I'll have him where he's kind of drawing, he's actually kind of pointing at himself. I think I'll have the other fans in here. Maybe he's kind of casting a spell. Let me get his little suit jacket while we're at it. Just like just like my OC, his OC, he also has like a big bow tie. So I think his is probably a little bit bigger than mine. So let's get one that's really nice and prominent. We get the lapels on his suit jacket. Alright, it's looking pretty good. Let me check on some for a brief moment. Alright, there we go. So now let me see. Let me get these two buttons in his shirt. Normally I wouldn't worry too much on details, but I figured here I just want to make sure everything looks right because his OC has a very distinct style to him as well. And from some of the art he's shown me of his character, his pants are a little baggier compared to Manny's. So let me guess. Let me get a spot for his shoes. he has very large feet. In fact, I'm kind of tempted to have some of his toes poking out because I know one thing he told me is that with his OC he taught me that's issue finding like shoes that actually fit him well, so he ended up kind of bursting at the seams a bit. So I'm thinking if I want to try to use that as a kind of nice little detail to add in. Let me kind of shorten these arms just a bit. Since he's kind of a short guy, I don't want his arms to be too long. Because even when you're doing cartoon characters, you still have to kind of account for proportions as well. So he has eyes. It's weird. Normally I tend to start with the face first, and then I kind of work my way down. But for some reason, like since I kind of like how his suit design really works, I kind of want to make sure I got that down pat before I went and got everything else out. I want to give him kind of a nice grin. Because if you're going to be a TV personality, you got to really have a really great smile in order to pull it off. Be a section for his muzzle. Maybe he has 2 ears. Well, actually, let me get his hair though while we're at it. Cause I know he has a kind of special deal where his hair kind of goes out from behind him as well. There we go. So let me get that. I can get his ears. Bring his bow tie back out. There we go. Oh, I almost forgot his old bushy tail. Now, let me see. Okay, now that I've got our good little rough sketch out, I'm just gonna try to refine it just a bit more before I start going in with the pen just yet. So we gotta get the underside of his fingers here. Gotta make his a little bit larger. other hand while I'm at it. Just kind of get his other thumb open here. Want to make sure it's open a little more so it kind of so it's a little more readable. Like I say, I always try to make sure, you know, so it's a readable, because I don't want to be open too much because I don't kind of cover up the silhouette of its head right here. Hey, thanks whoever liked it. Office 50 boy, if you happen to be out here anywhere, hey, thanks for dropping in. If you happen to be out there, by the way. Let me get his other little finger here. There we go, we're looking pretty good. Let me just kind of start refining this just a bit more. And normally I would have done kind of like done a lot more of my older live drawings where I'll just go straight in with the ballpoint pen, but now I'm kind of here now where I really will just go ahead and actually hang for just one moment. Stand by for just a moment. Alright, I'm back. Sorry that I got a sudden call that come in. Turned out it was another false alarm. Maybe bring out more of his teeth. On a slightly more unrelated note, you know, this week hasn't been pretty good so far. It's been really busy. You know, mainly with both my day jobs, especially earlier in the week before Independence Day over here. I actually did have to get called in for work last night because I was considering on doing a late night holiday stream, because I was considering doing that, but one I didn't want to schedule something like that at the very last minute unless I knew that was something I would definitely want to do. And plus, like, since I knew I had to go in, I knew it'd be really too late to really do it like once I got back. I think what I will do here, I think I will kind of use like that detail he suggested. Kind of having his like this, kind of having just like his feet kind of poking through the top of his shoes, since that's a detail he's kind of gone over from a few times we've kind of talked. Get his other fingers all red. Alright, now looking pretty good. So now I can move on to the next step, which is actually just kind of like start outlining and trying to. Do I want to go straight in with the black, or I want to do the red? I'm trying to see what type of color he's got. So I know he's got a lot of blues going on, so I think I'll just use the blue pen to start initial outline. So I'm gonna go down, get around his muzzle. Come down, get the bottom part of his top lip here. Let me bring the bottom part of his little smile down. Let me get his eyes while we're at it. Get his little eyebrows. And kind of bring this tough hair down a bit where cut wouldn't come out as far. That looks alright. Let me just get. So I'm gonna work my way down. You kind of indicate a bit of those shoulder pads. You get a little bit of those shoulder pads from his little blazer, his little suit jacket. We get the part of the jacket here. So let's get the other part of his arm here. Let's get the bottom part here. And normally what I'll do if I'm doing like these sketches, like a lot of times I will start in red, but others, depending on like what type of colors I know I'm going to be using a lot throughout the whole pictures, like I may do it with one of the more dominant colors. So let's not get his little bushy tail, and try and make sure his tail's not being covered too much by his arm here. I still want to make sure, you know, the whole pose is readable. Yeah, and I figured, I kind of wanted his pants to be a little baggy, because some of the art that he showed me that a lot of his hairs are kind of baggy, which I kind of like, because then, you know, it has Because, padded clothes can be very stylish, especially if we're talking like old school like zoot suits. If anybody, if they don't know what zoot suits are, they were really popular back in like the back in the 30s and 40s. They're very popular back in the day. Like wide rim hats, like very long sleeve, like long sleeves, like really high pants. They were kind of controversial too because around World War, because they used so much fabric, they're kind of considered taboo during World War II time, since like fabric was one of the things that was being rationed, in support for the war at the time. There's a little more to it too, but that's the overall gist. Also, for those of you kind of who watch Tom and Jerry, you might remember that short called The Zoot Cat, where Tom's trying to woo this girl that he's into, and ends up making a orange and like green striped zoot suit. And even though in the cartoon they kind of exaggerate a little things, like for things for the comedy, but how that suit looks in that cartoon is not too far off from how the real ones back then actually looked like. And in fair, there's different kinds like out there because you have some that are really baggy. You have some that are a little more like they're a little more slimmed down. Then of course you got other iconic Zooties. Of course you got like the one Michael Jackson went Smooth Criminal. The white one that has little blue accents to it. But it is a pretty stylish suit. Yeah, alright, that's looking pretty good. So, trying to see what color I want to go with next. Oh, in fact, I think I will do. Even though I did go over it in, even though I did just in blue, I'm just gonna start going everything over, just with this blue now. Cause I am planning on kind of going back over this in black later on. Just getting a good, nice even layer. Yeah, because anytime I think of like Zoot, of course I think of that cartoon, the Michael Jackson Zoot Suit, and also that song Zoot Suit Ride by Cherry Poppin' Daddies. Yeah, I know the name sounds really freaky. Yes, I know, but they had a song called Zoot Suit Riot, and it was loosely about, it was kind of celebration, about those type of like clothing. In fact, they had a lot of them. Not to go on a more detour. In fact, they had a lot of like told my swing songs, because that's kind of, they kind of like unofficially became like a swing revival group. Because the funny thing with them is Cherry Poppin' Daddies, like apparently they started out as a punk group. Yeah, oddly enough, they started out as a punk group, but then later on when they started developing their sound, occasionally they would do something that's more funky. They would do some jazzy stuff, but then they really got into doing stuff with swing, and that ended up kind of really sticking with them. Once they found they really liked doing that. Yeah, because when it comes to swing music, because I know it's funny enough, some of you probably noticed I got a little bit of electro swing in the background. And it's some kind of a new thing I've been kind of getting into, because normally when it comes to swing, I'm more used to listening to a lot of like the swing revival stuff from the 90s, so say like Royal Crown Review, Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. Brian Setzer Orchestra is one of my favorites. In fact, I was fortunate to see Brian Setzer and his orchestra about 2 times in the past. I saw, and both of them, I think when he did his Christmas tour, because I know for a while he always had tour where he would actually tour like every other Christmas with his orchestra, and it's always cool too because like he'll do a mixture of like his big band stuff, big stuff he does with the group. Will also do some old school stuff he did back with his old band called Stray Cats, So it'll be a mixture of doing like both like swing, like with swing jazz, a mix of like rockabilly, and it's a really like very neat and top, very nice combination. And man, he can really play. In fact, I don't know if they're still doing a tour now with the orchestra, because I know Brian Setzer and stuff. I know he still tours. At least, but I don't know if he does as much, because I know one of the tours he did where he was with Brian Setzer Orchestra. They were supposed to come in town about a few years back, but they ended up canceling that one because apparently he started developing tinnitus. And that's the thing that you have to kind of look out for. If you're actually playing music, especially playing music that's fairly loud, you want to make sure you protect your hearing, because you don't listen to loud music for a long period of time, and recovering yourself, it will over time kind of start damaging your ears. So it is something you have to kind of like look out for. Let's go lightly shutting inside the ear. I'm just gonna lightly go over there. So I know his pants are kind of like a light gray, so I'm just gonna use a light amount of black here. And it's interesting with that whole swing revival thing, because it kind of came and went. Because I think what kind of got kicked off, I want to say it really got started, once the little ska revival thing in the 90s, when you had like No Doubt and Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. Because those ska groups are known for having a lot of horns. And so, of course, once you had these swing groups that were at the time, they kind of got lumped into that. Because even though a lot of them weren't really ska, they still had that old school, like, horn-based sound. I think also what really helped is that, I know in specification with Brian Setzer, he had that hit Jump, Jive, and Wail. If I recall, because one, it was like a remix of an old, like, Louis Prima song. Those on Louis Prima, he was one of the big time, like, swing musicians from back in the day. But his version, it was featured in a Gap commercial back in the 90s. And I think from then, that along the music video, it kind of took off. And I think a lot of the groups that I mentioned, a lot of them are still around, because I know the Daddies, I think they still tour pretty regular this day. I want to say, like, Royal Carnival, I think they're still around, not as much. Big Bad Voodoo, yes, definitely. Then there's a couple other ones, like Squirrel Nut Zippers. I'm not sure if they still tour. They might. There's one other one I know that came from around that time, too. I cannot remember the name right now. It'll probably come to me later on. But a lot of these extra swing artists I got playing in the background, it's on new mix. A lot of these are fairly new, so I'm still kind of just vibing out to them the very first time, to be honest. And I'm liking it too. But I like to kind of like switch things up with my background music, especially now, because I always want to try to make sure that I keep everything fresh by not having things get stale by playing the same stuff like over and over again all the time. I'll go back over, with this blue here. Yeah, so I'll have to look in and see, how many of those screens are still around. Because one thing about like swingers, whether we're talking either like new ones or even old ones, a lot of them, unless they were kept together by a really good leader, a lot of them really don't last for too long. Because one thing about swing groups, they can be very expensive. Because of course, keep in mind, like your average swing group could have maybe 15, maybe 20 members. But the thing is like one, you gotta make sure you gotta pay them because you gotta pay them, pay them to play. You gotta pay, especially if they're touring too. You gotta pay them for their rooms, making sure everyone's being accommodated. And then of course on top of that, like Nautilus may be in the same line for a long time because I know, for example, even though he's not really, big band, Soon Ra, he did used to do a lot of swing stuff back in the day, and his group had like 15, 20 members, but he's had so many people coming. I think at least 100 people have like come and gone throughout the year because you had maybe some people that have been there for years. You had some people that were probably there for maybe like only a couple of days. Yeah, and that's how it is. Like with some of these swing groups, like sometimes you'll probably have like, even though you have so many people that'll come and go, you'll probably have those main like few people that kind of keep the whole thing together. Like say for them with Soon Ra, it was just him, but also he had two saxophonists, John Gilmore I think on tenor sax and Marshall Allen on I think he did alto sax as well. And funny enough, Marshall's Soon Ra, he passed away a few years ago. John Gilmore took over, but when he passed, Marshall Allen took over, and he still does to this day. In fact, he just turned 101 not too long ago, so he's still living. He's probably still a few musicians from that era that are still around. Let's do a little bit of cross hatching here. All right. So I'm just gonna cross hatch, just really kind of go over this layer, just make everything very even. As always, guys, like some of these colors that look a little odd now, I am gonna kind of go over with some other colors to kind of mix them in later on down the line. Yeah, I think I was adding little sparkles here to kind of indicate that there is magic coming from those fingertips. Okay, I think I will start going back over everything with the black now. Now just kind of really start thinking out our outlines. Because I've already kind of started laying down enough color to where some of my lines I started setting, now they're starting to kind of bleed together. So let's go ahead and actually kind of bring them back out. Let's card dark the inside of his ears here. his eyes. Let me just kind of color. Let me kind of shade in his little eye, his like eyelids here. Alright, that looks pretty good. Almost forgot. Let me actually kind of color in his other ear while we're at it. Yeah, this guy's been. It is actually my first time drawing this character. He's really fun to draw. So I'm really loving how he's turning out. At the bottom of his lip as it come out. Let me get that bow tie and make sure that's more prominent here. There we go. Yeah, I need to get on checking more on Electro Swing though, because I know I know off the top of my head that I've been meaning to check out more, but I think it's called Diablo Swing Orchestra. Because I know even though they're Electron, they do use like real instruments as well. And I've heard they put on a really fantastic live show. But I don't know if they tour in America, because I think they're like a Russian group. So I don't know if they're doing American tours, at least as of yet. Other finger here. Let's get his tail. get the other leg here. Let me get the soles of his shoes. Think of the claws of his little pointy toes kind of sticking out from inside. So let me see. Have him do it for this other toe too. Now let's kind of go over and kind of darken these shoes up a bit more. And it's kind of different because normally I'm not used to kind of like drawing other people's OCs like that often. Even though there are a few I've kind of done in the past. I know one of the most recent one I think I've done, at least aside from this one I'm doing right now, is that I did one those of you on BlueSky might recognize the name I think it's Jovathor. He had this character that's called I think it's called Taxi Space Goat, where he's this kind of mythological like goat-like creature, but he has like a human Sonic character. And I remember at one point on BlueSky he had a special thing where he incurred like a drawing challenge where people who actually are watching can actually kind of draw it, in their own style. And I took my own crack at it, ended up turning out really well. But what was great is at Junkyard he ended up liking that, and I actually felt a lot to know that at least one that he saw it, but also they liked it too. Especially because I didn't think that they probably would be able to see it though. Kind of darken his tail a bit more, because even though it's gray, it want to be a darker shade. Just kind of darken it up just enough to get a nice mid-level shade. I meant to have a lot more drawing stuff kind of done this week. But one, I've been so busy, but also, of course, I got a commission I'm currently working on. And there's a few other things, too. Because, like, a lot of times, if you have, like, certain things that you have to do in order to get done, sometimes it's kind of hard to kind of focus on, like, anything else. Because you want to make sure you get the important stuff, out the way. And just kind of like how I go over his hands here, too. So, let me see how it's looking up here. Oh, I forgot this whole top portion here. Yeah. Hey, Shay, how you doing? I didn't realize you dropped in. Glad to see you. Just to kind of bring you up to date, I'm actually drawing the OCs of one of my watchers, Good Boy Spiffy, of his OC named Henry. If anyone else that have been dropping in, he's a magician, but he's also kind of like a television. But he's also kind of huge, like a really huge personality too, almost like a TV show host in a way. And also, the more I'm kind of drawn to, so I'm kind of getting vibes of the wolf from that new the Bad Guys movie from DreamWorks. In fact, that reminds. I think that second one's gonna come out pretty soon. I'm definitely excited to see that. Because I haven't kept up with DreamWorks that much as of lately, but I remember Bad Guys being one of the few I actually saw lately that I actually really liking. In fact, funny enough, the Bad Guys, I think around that movie came out, I think that was one of the first, if not the first movie I saw in theaters, after the pandemic ended, and everything started opening back up. A lot of it was started slowly opening back in. And the movie was out, so I figured let me go and see it and see how it was. And I ended up surprisingly really enjoying it. I was at Clacton Pier having fun. Oh, good! I'm glad to hear that. Clacton Pier. I think I know where that is. Oh, okay, so it's on Clacton Sea over in the UK. Okay, yeah, I've heard that place is really nice. It's nice. Parents been out there. Parents they have big history. It's been out there for a long time. Yeah, but I'm glad you had a good time though. I'm glad to hear that. That also reminds me, I still need to get around to actually planning my next vacation. Because I already had one major, because of course I did a cruise trip, with my family earlier this past spring. But I am overdue to kind of do one at least for myself, or later on, in the fall. And I'm still deciding what do I want to do though, because I was thinking about probably going to Chattanooga again, Chattanooga, Tennessee, because they're having their own Chattanooga Comic Con there. I was thinking about doing that because I went there last year and it being really well, because the whole thing was great. There was a lot of activities, but also I got a chance to meet a lot of really great voice actors there. Because for the first time, I had met Bill Farmer, I had met Jeff Bennett, I had met Scotty Nez, who voiced Shaggy and Scooby at one point in time, and most importantly, this was also big, right? I got to see Rob Paulson. So it was a great. So it was a great experience. I'm definitely considering doing that again. I just have to kind of see what they have on the bill this time around and see who they have coming for that event. Because luckily that place in Chattanooga, it's not too far from where I am. I think it's about 2 hour drive from where I am, so it's not that far. So that's something I'm thinking about doing. And I figure if not that, what I might end up doing is that I'll probably either do some down in Florida, because I do have relatives that live down in Florida. So I was thinking maybe going to Orlando like I did last year. Because last year I did the Punk at a Park Music Festival, and that one was a huge amount of fun too. Of course, that's gonna be a longer trip. I think that one, it can be about 7 hours, but it can be way up to 8 depending on how traffic is. For those who haven't been down to Florida, if you're ever traveling, make sure you start early, because once those afternoon hours hit, just to let you know, you're gonna be in traffic for a good while, especially if you're going down Central Florida towards Orlando, because you got a combination of two crowds. You got a combination of crowds folks that are coming home or coming to work, but also you got a lot of tourists there too that are heading to and from all the attractions. So that is something to keep in mind, if you're ever thinking about driving through Florida, especially during peak vacation time, spring and summertime. So that's something you need to keep in mind. Let me just add kind of a little bit of purplish tint, to his facial hair. Plus it helps. I think since some of the marks that I made here, they end up being a little reddish anyway, so I figured this works perfect. I think I have a pink on hand at the most, so I'm not going to go too hard in the red for this one. So let me go over his other hand here. Just a very light amount of I'm just being very light with the red here because I don't want to get too red, but I just want to kind of keep it from keep his fur from being a little bit too gray. Because that's what I tend to like to do if I'm working with like blacks and grays. Even though I use gray a lot, I never like use like straight gray because I feel like grays are kind of mixtures like browns, like purples and blues. Those are more interesting rather than just a standard like black type of gray. And plus, I feel like even shading with like browns, like dark purples and dark blues, those tend to mix the colors a lot better than say if you use black. And granted, I know I've said in the past, I know there's that art advice people say that you should never use black. I think the advice is that you shouldn't rely on using black because there are times where using black, is applicable. Like say for example, if you're using a very dark color to begin, if you're using like either like a green, a dark blue, or a purple. If you use a color that's already very dark already, it's okay just going in and using that black, kind of like start shading things in. It's warranted. The only times it can be a problem if you're using a very bright, vibrant color, like say like orange, red, or yellow, like really warm colors, that's where it can become a problem because like if you start adding like straight black to it, when you start for shadows, it can make your colors very murky and swampy. So like say for example, if you want to kind of get some good like shading values you want to use yellow, instead of using a black, you might want to use purple because purple is like a complementary color, and you use that to get some nice like brown, nice like golden like brownish colors, or you can use a brown and get some nice like autumn colors as well. Like there's different things you can work with. So I say I don't always be so quick to discard on black, but just be noted you don't have to always rely on it. I think I'll give his little underside shirt on the inside. I think I'm gonna give that a little like a reddish tint. So now I guess I'm just gonna go over his lapels of his jacket a bit more here. Let me kind of darken these up. Just kind of loosely go over his shoes just a bit more. Just kind of darken things up. Just making sure everything's looking pretty good. Everything's looking all right. And now I think I'm gonna actually finally move on to the other one I've been neglecting for so long. So I'm just gonna go over this, with this light blue that it has. Because whereas the other blue here, it kind of has more like a reddish tint to it, which is why it works so well with the red. This one's a little bit yellow. It's kind of more like a sea blue in a way. So it's a little bit brighter. It's like has a slightly different tint compared to the other one. So that's why I'm kind of switching in between using between both blues. Because you have some like blues that are very warm. You have some blues that are very cool. Because like this is even so bright, it's more like a warmer blue, whereas the one on here, it's more of a cooler one. Let me just kind of I need to turn just a bit just to kind of get my strokes in. But once I am done with this character, I may have time to do like one more like brief little like brief sketch before I have to go and and sign off for today. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And thank you. Even though his real name is Mr. Henry, he does kind of also remind you of Mr. Wolf in a way. But his actual name's Henry. Let me just kind of get up here too. I don't know if I want to add a little bit of shading to it. I think I'm probably okay. I think I might just go and keep it as is. Because that's the thing, like sometimes depending on the picture, sometimes I'll go for more, I will go in for the deep shading, other times I won't. It just depends like how I'm really liking it. Because because sometimes when I'm working on something, I could do an illustration, I think it looks good as is, without any extra shadows. Another attempt, I think it may be okay with it. And even then, if I do shadows, sometimes depends on if I decide to. In fact, let me use the pink while I'm at it. Just kind of give this like a more pink, because I know his tie for this, so it has like a reddish, almost like magenta like it's like color too. So let me go ahead and actually add that while I'm at it. Yeah, there we go. Take it down. Where was I? I think I lost my train of thought for a moment. Because even okay, I remember now. Okay, because even if I'm adding shadows, sometimes I have to debate if I want to use like hard shadows or I don't like soft shadows. And usually most of the time, if I'm doing like shadows, sometimes I'll just do soft ones because I like having my drawings have a very soft look anyway. And plus, like with soft shadows, they're not as jarring with hard shadows because with hard shadows, they work, but you really got you got to really establish where your light source is gonna be. But also, if they look really odd, they can like really stand out. So that's why it looks very important if you're doing like hard shadows. You want to make sure you're like kind of going within the shape of the body or body part that you're shading in, because they can and will look really odd. I mean, that's kind of one of the things I've always kind of liked about at Dragon Ball Z's artwork, because like they really do such a good job with like a cell shape, cell shading, because you have these hard shadows on all these characters that are very muscular. Yeah, so now it's just a matter of kind of like adding like more finishing touches and just really kind of like fine tuning, just making everything looks good. Because I think everything else is pretty good because I got all the colors down. Yeah, everything's where it needs to be. So now it's a matter of like adding like little touches in here like for these shadows. And that's going to be pretty much it for the most part for this one. Let me just add a little bit of shadows here. Just gonna do a little cross-hatching magic here. And at one point, I think when I was going over, when Spiffy was showing me design for it, showing for Henry here, even showed me some voice work. One of his friends did, one of the friends, a voice actor, and they actually did a pretty good job gives a really nice voice. Billy Shirley, goodbye, Reggie. And I'll see you later, Shay. I'm glad you were able to drop in. And what he was able to do, he kind of showed me like a good voice, that he had made for him. It really worked for him because they had that nice like bubbly TV personality type voice. But it was already really it was peppy too, with kind of a bit of an edge. Kind of reminded me of Tony Oliver from Lupin the Third franchise, because he kind of gives like Lupin, that happy-go-lucky lucky type character, but with a bit of an edge to him. I think I'll use this blue. I think I'll use the blue here for some of this extra shading here. Yeah, but I appreciate all you guys that kind of dropped in for today. I'm sorry I did end up kind of starting a little later, but I'm glad you guys kind of dropped in. In fact, one of the things I am almost considering on doing in the near future is that I am planning on actually, I know I've mentioned in the past where I thought about to change up the times I actually do these streams, because I'm aware for some of you guys, like I know it may be too a little like early in the day, because I know because I know a good chunk of you are probably in different time zones. Because I was thinking about doing maybe on some days, if I'm off on like certain weekends, if I might be able to do in the afternoon rather than say in the morning. Yeah, but I just like doing in the morning. Well, one, because like if it's early, I can get it out the way, but also, just to kind of be in tune with just like watch, kind of like waking up to watch like cartoons on TV back in the day. I kind of like it's kind of want to have these kind of that same type of feel where you're waking up to watch big tunes like around that time. All right, so I think we're almost good. So let me add. There's a few other things I need to get to kind of finish this whole thing off. Let me add a little bit of detail for his shoes. Those of you in here long know I love using gel pens. Color I was going to use. Where's that pencil I have? Here we go. Here we go. Just kind of make him pop. I'm just going to use this yellow for the background. In fact, I realize a lot. I don't really intend to do it, but I find myself using yellow quite a lot for the background. Maybe I just think this is a nice color where, you know, it's bright, it pops, but also it's easy to blend since it's such like a bright color to begin with, you know, against like a white background. Because I could have very well decided to leave it, just to leave it white, but I figured like that would have made it a little bit too boring. So I figured I might as well go ahead and actually a little yellow, just kind of brighten things back up. That looks pretty good. Let me just kind of lightly go over his fur here. Just kind of give, you know, his fur kind of a brownish tint to it. Yeah, because sometimes, that's always a certain color. Sometimes you don't need, you know, like, you need just enough for what you need to do. Don't really necessarily have to do it, but I figure I'd use a little red here for some of these mid-tones. Add more dark of the shadow here. And even though I don't really use that much, I think I'll add a little bit of green here. Alright, cool. So that, my friends, that is Spiffy Boy's Henry. Alright, so guys, I hope you enjoyed watching do this guy. So I might have room to do one more character before I have to go. And for this one, I'm probably gonna keep this one fairly quick. So I think what I will do is that I'm just gonna draw a character that I've definitely drawn in the stream before and something I've drawn many times. I'll just do Yakko from Animaniacs. I think I'll have this kind of giving like a finger gun at you. So we get his mouth while we're at it. We get the large belt buckle that he has. This is a rarity. I'm actually not using a reference this time around. Mainly because I've drawn him so many times. A lot of times I don't need a reference. And I know I've said this once, so I've said it again. There's nothing wrong with you using references. Hey, they just train your eyes how to see. Let me get his tail while we're at it. Let me kind of bring his nose just a bit in more. Alright, so let me get his other little glove hand. Alright, so I think this one I'll just go straight in with the black. And I'm just actually just kind of give it a nice big smile. This is the one of the most confident. I figure kind of giving kind of like the little wink and the gun type of a thing, type of expression. Plus, I realize it's been a while, like since I've done Animaniacs here on these live streams. I think the last one I did, now that I think of it, was probably I want to say it was probably a couple months ago. No, yeah, it definitely was. I just forgot what I did that time though. Something looks off about the face. I cannot pinpoint what it is though. Yeah. Oh well. It'll probably look okay when I add more stuff to it. These are some of the characters I tend to kind of find drawing a lot, especially if I'm in an art block. I'll probably draw something because I know I can do very well. Just kind of get creative juices flowing a bit. Because sometimes when it comes to art block, it can be a matter of deciding like what to draw. I mean, figuring out what to draw. But even then, it's like you may have a lot of ideas, but deciding which one you want to stick with. Alright, so start coloring in his fur. This one will probably be a little more rougher compared to the other one, like since I will probably get out of here pretty soon. But also, like since I know this is gonna be fairly quick, I figure I'm not gonna spend as much time on it. Because I can always touch it up later. Maybe I'll touch up in a later stream, or just touch up in my downtime. So let's get his ears while we're at it. Let's get his fur. Cool. Give me just one moment. Let's get his other arm here. Let me just get a little bit of cross-hatching game back in. Get the top up here, just do a little cross hatching here. I'm trying to think, do I want to make these eyes a bit bigger? I think I will. I think let me go ahead and actually start coloring the eyes. And it kind of look, and now look at it now, it's kind of looking how back when we did in the Anime X that were animated by TMS. Because for those that don't know of Anime X, they back with the original show, they had like 6 different studios animate for them. Because they had TMS, you know, that's the big one. Then they had Wang, they had Star Tunes, those ACOM, and then those 2 more. There was Coco and Freelance. And the funny thing about like those animes, they all had their own different styles and look to them. Like say for example with TMS. They were pretty popular, so they're known for doing a lot of anime, but also doing a lot of high budget stuff. So a lot of their stuff was often very, very polished, very expressive, and very sharp and snappy. Of course, then you had something like Wang, where sometimes they weren't as fluid, but like a lot of their animation was very loose and very wacky. Which personally are the ones where Wang did the best. I feel like with that studio, they always got the Warners look incredibly wacky. Very wacky and demented in a way. 'Cause I think it's the way that they used to draw their eyes, because they wouldn't have it completely centered. It'd be kind of off center and slanted, so it kind of gave us a really off kilter look about them. Then of course you had Star Tunes, which they often made ones very chubby, but they had their own very sharp sense of timing. But then you had other ones, I think like Freelance, which is kind of odd because they didn't have their for that long, but their stuff could be either really good or really bad, because a lot of times their animation would be really rough. Characters would constantly go on and off model. So they only have it for a few episodes. Then you had ACOM, and they did a lot of the episodes that are in the back half of the show. And ACOM's alright, because they've got work. I think they did some work for Simpsons for a long period of time. But a lot of times their work tends to be a little on the more generic side. I wonder how a lot of different animation studios keep a character design on model, especially people behind the studio had a distinct design. You know what? That I'm not sure. I would assume that what happens is once the main character models have been approved, they're farmed out to these different studios, and think whoever's in charge of animation department, they'll just kind of go from there. Because it could be a mixture of going on the official model sheet, but also going on whatever storyboard animation director they have on duty. Because even sometimes the animation can change depending on what type of animation director they have working on an episode. Like say for example, like modern SpongeBob. One thing that's happened a lot as of lately is that a lot of the new episodes were directed by like Vincent Waller and Bob Jacques and Kelly Armstrong. And for those who don't know, like those are names that used to work on the Ren and Stimpy cartoons. And so a lot of those sensibilities and how they storyboard and actually had designed their characters, a lot ended up kind of showing in their episodes. But I'm assuming, like as far as farming them out, I'm assuming that's how they. Assuming like that's how they do it. And my guess is like a lot of time. My guess is like, of course, like once they kind of farm these different studios, I guess they don't really check on them unless they won't really check on it until it's already back. I know occasionally sometimes like if some inch has been complete, that we'll have to go over against to make sure there's areas that are kind of sloppy, have to be redone. Because I know that's what happened at one point with Kennedy Studios. For us, Kennedy they did a lot of like animation in the 80s. They did a lot of stuff with Pup Named Scooby-Doo and Tiny Toons. And I think I've heard, with Tiny Toons, what happens when they did the first season, apparently a lot of their stuff had to be recalled because a lot of the drawings, a lot of their animation ended up being really inconsistent. Because the weird thing about Kennedy cartoons, like, I don't hate them as much as other people do, but I can understand why some people don't like them because while they can be very, like, loose and bouncy, they can at times be very kind of sloppy as well. As well, but I feel like at their best, like when they did good, they did really good. And I'm always curious to see how they would have done on a show like Animaniacs, but the show being very wacky and loose. I think Kennedy's studio, they would have really had a ball, with Animaniacs, because I think they mainly did stuff like with Hanna-Barbera, Pup Named Scooby-Doo. They did Tiny Toons, and they did do a few stuff with Disney for a while too. But of course, with Disney, like since they tend to have more of a tighter rein on their quality. A lot of like their quirks don't really show up as much in the Disney cartoons, so they're like on a tighter leash. So I guess it varies. Depending on which studio is actually like overlooking the whole thing, losing barn to. It varies. But I can say, and just being a headache just back in the day, because nowadays, like since we got shows that come out, they're all kind of done maybe one or two studios, and they're making like shorter and you have like these shorter seasons now, like versus back in the day we had these shows that are coming out, they probably already had like a certain amount of episodes already scheduled and ready to go, and that's a matter like farming out, like you make farm out this or these episodes to this studio, farm out this these episodes to another one. And actually getting them back so that way they're all due in time for the premiere. Some people shade in the his red nose. Number one, was Hanna-Barbera outsourced or was it always in-house? Explains the whole roster of it provides mainly cheap animation. As far as I know, I think a lot of what they did was in-house. Pretty sure a lot of it is. I think the only time they really started outsourcing stuff was for the ink and paint. I think it was probably the ink and paint department, and I think that's a lot of that when they start going more digital with their coloring. But as far as I know, a lot of their stuff was done in-house. That was kind of the big thing about Hanna-Barbera and Filmation, like back in their heydays, that they were able to say what you will about the quality of their animation of their shows. They were able to give animators work at a time where it was very limited. Because if you want to do animation, like if you didn't have that, your best chance is like you could either do your commercial, learn how to teach, or if you were lucky, maybe do a Disney film. But of course, like Disney around the 60s and 70s, they were kind of losing the direction at the time of what they wanted to do. Even though they were making some good stuff at the time. And either that or probably go indie or do something more like with Ralph Bakshi and Don Bluth at the time where they were doing their own thing. I'm not 100% sure, but but I believe they were, like in a lot of animation was done in house, at least especially during their heyday. Because I think like later on, like once I think later on, I think once they got competition, because once all these other studios started like popping up around the animation renaissance, I think then they did start outsourcing. At least they started outsourcing like some of their work to other departments. So I'm just gonna lightly kind of color in his pants. Yeah, look at that big name. Like, oh yeah, that's true. I think it helps that they did a lot of captioning of a lot of like the DC and Marvel stuff. That really kind of helped choco their brand. I think between having a lot of like big name collaborations, but also like since they kind of really dominate that whole like TV animation like area, because for a long time they really weren't challenged. Because I think the only other main studios that was really like going toe to toe to them, as far as having a quantity of cartoons, is probably like Filmation. I want to say UPA too, but I know UPA they did a lot. I think they did a lot more like theatrical stuff. They did some TV stuff too. But yeah, I think you're right. Having those big names, and just from the fact that they were kind of one of the few that really kind of dominate televised animation at the time, they really kind of like dominate that field. It just wasn't until like probably like the 80s and 90s when all these other studios started popping up. It's like now they had competition. Because of course you had Warner Brothers, and of course Disney. They started coming in, started doing their own like TV shows. And a lot of what I know, like some of it I found out through different blogs. Others I've gone on websites. So I think it was Cartoon Database. There's another website too. I think called Trowfast. That's more of like a blog site that does a lot of like animation history. And there's a few others too that I watched. I can't remember the name right now. I often like to look those things up because just kind of see how animation is. Because of course you can see like how things are made, but also it makes you appreciate how really what a huge collaborative effort that it is. As far as putting like a cartoon together. Yeah, a little bit of blue here. Just give like a purplish tint before I go back in with the yellow. Alright, so now I'm gonna do the magic color mixing. I'm just gonna go over this with some of that yellow. Ooh, excuse me, sorry. Yeah, but this is turning out very nicely. Normally I wouldn't use this, but I'm gonna kind of go over it with the red a little bit more. Just kind of get that brownish look back into these pants. Maybe color the inside of that belt buckle. And speaking of interesting part, I actually came across a video not too long ago on YouTube. Apparently there's one company where they still have a few like traditional like ink and painters. Plus it's ever come to Gen X era. They're to sell several times. Say care that stay for it. President catchphrases. Oh yeah, most definitely. Especially when it came to what I call the Scooby-Doo format. Scooby-Doo / Archie format, where they always had a show that centered around a group of kids that either do two things. They either like solve mysteries, or they play music in a band, or sometimes a variety of both. because you had it like Scooby Doo. Because you saw it like in Jabberjaw. You saw it in the Chan Clan. You saw it in Josie and the Pussycats. And while all those shows, and some of those shows had their own kind of like flair to them, like they all kind of follow a similar type of format. And you're right, of course, all of them had their own like type of music cues. They had their own voice actors, because in fact, even the same type of character types too. Because I know like a lot of their regulars, they had I want to say it actually hires you. That would be neat if they actually did that, though. Of course, that would depend if they end up like if they end up kind of restarting the whole reboot thing. Because if they end up doing that and I'm getting a call, hey, I wouldn't mind doing something like that. Yeah, Jabba like, oh yeah, definitely, mostly. I think I remember back when it was aired, I didn't remember really liking that. Plus, it helped get because it had that twist because because it wasn't a dog, it was actually a shark underwater who sounded like Curly. Who, even though really that was actually Frank Welker. To my recollection, I was doing like a Curly impression. And Frank Welker, he's been in the business for a long time because he's been I think he was definitely like one of like the mainstays for Hanna-Barbera as far as their voice acting. So of course, it's him, Casey Kasem, Don Mezek, Janet Waldo. They had so many. And I think that's one of the things. When I compare to say something like Filmations, I think like Hanna-Barbera, they had a lot more memorable characters, but they also had a really great like vocal cast too. Because I think it helped that since a lot of those voice actors, since they had a big history, like working in radio, they really had a knack of like doing different voices, like giving them personality, and that really helps a great deal when you're where you're making cartoons where the animation is no longer like the strongest suit anymore. Like now you want to make sure like the writing and the voice acting, you want to make sure all of that is actually like it's still really good. But it was definitely remember. And plus, I remember they had that cartoon on Groovies where they had those music videos, and they had that one song called "Me and My Friends Get No Respect," like that song. And the only reason I remembered so much because I know Cardi used to play it, but also Boomerang. They played it for the longest time. In fact, I think they played it more than all the other music videos that they had. More than I can say it's a good song, but also it's just like just the animation was great. And it's probably the most recent thing that I know that they've done with them. Because I think they did a brief special with the crossover Scooby Doo at one point. But alright, I believe that is actually it for these two. So we got our boy Yakko here. And we also got Spiffy Boy's OC Henry here as well. So guys, I hope you all really enjoyed today's stream. I'm sorry it started a little later than usual. But I hope to see you all again probably around the same time, if not a little earlier next week. Of course, I'll let you know if anything changes. But until then, I hope to see you all again around that same time next week. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. See you soon.